I'm sure part of what you're saying applies to our next area, but another area of loathing, it seems, in the industry are social media influencers. So, how would you, let's first principles, do our definitions first. How do you think, what defines a social media influencer, wine influencer, versus sort of traditional wine journalists or media for you?
I think of an influencer truly as being anyone who actually influences opinion
Mm-hmm.
on wine. So if you are a journalist who is also an influencer in the space, then that works. I think the traditional definition of an influencer is someone on, say, Instagram or TikTok or social media, um, who uses that platform to promote wine,
Mm-hmm.
wine travel, wine brands, whatever it is, a wine lifestyle, through imagery, short captions, video. So it's a highly visual medium,
Yes.
which lends itself to wine if you think about it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's the landscapes in wine country are just stunning, and the bottles
It's
are
true.
gorgeous, and the sound of a cork popping, and it's a great platform. But there is this frustration in the wine world for the wine influencer.
Hmm. And um, so there's obviously probably again a protectiveness at stake here from the serious people who have studied the subject. Is there anything else going on in terms of prompting the backlash? I mean, there's been some serious backlash against certain wine influencers. I don't know when it was, a few months ago, there was a hashtag going around. I'll beat myself, but wine bitch. And
Yeah.
so, what is that? What's driving that?
Um, So there is a level of frustration that certain wine influencers don't actually have wine credentials and often will post information that is actually incorrect. I think I read somewhere that like we store wine on its side because if we don't it gets corked or something like that, and I'm grossly butchering that, but
Sure.
there is a frustration among people like students of wine or even just serious wine consumers who are like, that's not even actually correct. So I know you have 50,000 followers, but maybe don't spread misinformation about the wine world.
Right.
Again, there is a belief in the wine community that influencers don't actually know about wine, and they are detracting from the serious wine writers out
Hmm.
there. Journalists in particular feel frustrated by it. Like, I'm not getting invited to press trips, or I am getting invited to press trips and pitched, but getting crowded out by the influencers who are there by virtue of their 100,000 followers.
Right.
Um,
Right. And I
and
think you quoted
just
Tom.
posing in
Yeah.
a vineyard with a sexy bottle is not
Yes.
necessarily communicating information about the wine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you quoted Tom Wark, who published an article, and you said wine writers are generally trying to tell a story, whereas wine influencers are trying to get the right light, something like that.
Which
That
I disagree with. I think a picture tells a story.
so worth a thousand
Why?
words.
Right? Why do people spend so much money on advertising?
It's true.
It's it's a gorgeous photo that's designed to be aspirational in
Yeah.
many ways, or to communicate a story in a picture. So yes, I think there is a cohort of influencers who perhaps lack proper wine training or the knowledge, but I don't necessarily want to write off wine influencers categorically, because there are plenty of wine consumers who don't actually need to know the story of the vineyard and the family and the oak program again, and the, how the vines are trained. They really
Right.
just want to drink the stuff.
Yeah.
So because the story or the background and the science exists doesn't necessarily mean that that is what's selling the wine to every consumer. We all
It's
need
true.
different things.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think, just in terms of how we deal with influencers, even if there is something incorrect, I think it could be more of a, as they say, a call in culture rather than call out, rather than
Thank you.
shaming
Yes.
and pushing. How about, asking, inviting them in a kind way and saying, this is, the accuracy or whatever, but not in a like public shaming.
But that's, it's like there is a level of condescension that exists in the wine industry that's incredibly frustrating. And when you talk to everyday wine consumers who aren't scholars of wine, they're
Mm,
frustrated by it. And there's a reason people feel afraid to share
yeah.
their thoughts on wines. There's a reason they feel intimidated in a restaurant to order wine. There's
Yes.
a reason they find it elitist and scary. And it's like the only beverage out there that people are scared by. And it's supposed to be this product of pleasure and inclusion
Right.
and bringing people together. So let's not make it this scary beast.
Absolutely. It's one of the first things that I had to get over just in starting a podcast. I've been writing about wine for 20 years, started the podcast about a year and a half ago. I still had to get over, like, what if I say something wrong? What if I get an appellation wrong or whatever? And it's like, sometimes it's you have to move beyond your own ego, but also just open yourself up to be vulnerable and to be
Mhm.
corrected and hope that someone does it kindly rather than, yeah, the other way.
I mean, Natalie, I'm sitting here like body tense, clenching myself in case I say something wrong about wine, right? Like the wine industry loves to beat
I know.
people up, and let's not do that anymore. Yeah,
No,
inclusion, call in. I'm like
exactly.
all about that. And let's not forget that there are plenty of wine influencers out there on social media, excuse me, who have strong wine backgrounds and who have their WSET level 3 or level 2 or their SOMs.
That's
They
true.
have blogs on the side. Like,
Yeah.
can we not write them all off?
No,
I've worked with
exactly.
plenty, and they're great to have on press trips. They're fun, they're engaging, they ask questions, they want to tell the stories, and I think that's the spirit of inclusion,
Yeah,
sense of fun and passion and enjoyment that we need.
exactly. Exactly. And I don't know, have you ever read the books of Brene Brown? The She writes, she's US based,
Maybe.
Brene Brown. She writes about vulnerability and shame. And she talks about the quote from Theodore Roosevelt that it's not the man in the sidelines, which at the time he's using all male words, but that's okay. Not the people on the sidelines who heckle. It's the man in the arena that's getting grit on his face and blood and whatever that matters. And her opinion is,
Mhm.
if you're not in the arena, if you're not trying, if you're not opening yourself vulnerably, then I don't want to hear from you. I don't care.
I love
Yeah,
that.
I love it too. And it's something that
Yeah.
gives me courage that, to get out there because online, it is the arena, especially online, social media.
Oh God, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
And so it could be, it's great in many ways to connect, like to be able to do these virtual, chats and to share it on social media channels and bring more people in, but it comes with the other side too. And so I think the only defense is vulnerability these days, is just to admit, yeah, you know what? I'm not perfect. I don't know everything, even after 20 years. And it's like, just tell me or whatever. But anyway, so you can
Yeah.
unclench there. This is not, or have a drink, whatever. One of the two.
At least I know where Switzerland
Yeah,
is.
exactly. Thank goodness for that. But that's great. That's disarming to even just put it out there.
Yeah.
So there are those some downsides to influencers. What have you seen or read about that can be sort of the less positive, aside from inaccuracies about wine? Other things when it comes to influencers?
Yeah, so I work on the PR side as well. So I write about wine, but I also I work with clients and promote their regions and their brands and
Right.
do marketing. And I've worked with my share of influencers, and it's not everybody, but yes, there are some who I think earn influencers a bad name by doing it for the free product or the free trips. I get a lot of calls for personal favors, and we all do that. Everybody wants to call in a favor, and everyone wants to sort of drop a name, and I get it. Um, but I do get a lot of calls about, can you set this up for me for a personal visit in exchange for a story, or a story, like a not a static post, but like an Instagram story.
Right.
um, or I've had people behave really, really badly when I've hooked up winery visits where they get drunk or they bring their
Mm,
friends, and they sort of earn themselves a bad name,
sure.
and it's embarrassing for me, and it sort of puts me in a bad light. But I it's it's the exception rather than the
Hmm.
norm, but I think it has caused
Hmm.
frustration in the wine world. So I think it's important to, as an influencer, really view yourself as a wine professional
Hmm.
if that's what you are going for. Less personal asks, being respectful, um, you know, not stopping everything to fix your face and get the right light, especially if you're working with other journalists who are there and not necessarily doing that.
Hmm.
I think there are ways to get around it, but yeah, there's some bad behaving people, and
In every barrel. Yeah, in every bunch.
right. It's not limited to influencers by any
No, even
means.
wine journalists of 20-year
Yeah.
veterans can
Yeah.
misbehave. Um,
Yes. Yes.
so, is there a way for the wine industry to like deal with influencers? Because they are like you, and I hear this from wineries. They are deluged with requests for samples and everything else. How do you deal with all of this from an industry perspective? Is there, I don't know, I doubt we can get into certification, but is it just word of mouth or an informal registry? What is the way to deal with this?
I think it's encouraging brand. I mean, it's on the
Yeah,
brand who is bringing in an influencer to set the parameters and set them properly and really negotiate that contract. Even if it's an informal contract with an influencer, to say, here is my expectation, here is what I would like in exchange
hmm,
for. Here's the agreement. When you come on my property, then we expect a static post, a blog post, a 3 photos that we can then use, whatever the contract is, or whatever the agreement
sure.
is, so that the brand can always tie it to ROI. And I think that is, at the end of the day, what we're all looking
Sure.
for is the ROI on that exchange. And the same thing for the PR. Like, I have to constantly defend earned media to my clients to say, here's what this actually means.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's on the brands to really outline
Hmm.
expectations and then go from there to decide whether or not working with an influencer is right for them.
It must be hard to tie, like even with influencers or say an Instagrammer who has whatever 50,000 followers or more. It must still be a challenge to say because she, and they tend to be mostly female, posted this, we got X sales. Like, it must be hard to tie it together. I mean, can you at all?
I think marketers have an easier time with it because they can actually sort of embed things and kind of track
Okay.
conversions
Okay.
better. But when it comes to influencers and publicists and PR people, it is tricky. And we can quote impressions data all day
Right.
long, but does it necessarily translate to sales conversions? So I think when you look at a program over time, you can track things like the tone that's being used, the mentions, are we moving the business forward long term?
Right.
And looking at any relationship with an influencer or a publicist, I think it has to be viewed long
Yes.
term. What is the trajectory
Hmm.
here? But I know there are some very smart gals in the wine industry who are working on this very
Oh, yeah.
problem right
Oh,
now. So
is there
yes,
any
so.
details you can share yet? Or that makes me curious.
Um, I don't know that I can formally share any details, but I had a phenomenal conversation with a gal named Rachel
Okay.
Woods. If anyone wants to Google her in the wine space,
Hmm.
who is working on, she's sort of like a data nerd. She comes from
Huh.
Facebook. And, we had this great conversation. She's working with an influencer, Wine with Paige, as well to solve this problem. And we've been having some really interesting conversations about ways that influencers can better sort of, I guess, merchandise their offerings in terms of real trackable ROI.
Wow.
And I think it applies to PR people as well.
Absolutely. It's one of those um, softer things, and yet it's vital because we know the
It's vital.
marketing cycle or even funnel, the sales funnel starts at the very top with awareness
Mm-hmm.
and then moves
Mm-hmm.
to liking and so on. And it's only at the bottom that you get to purchase and repeat purchase, but it has to start with that awareness, which is where PR and perhaps Instagram and others play such a vital part. So,
Well, if you ask any of your friends, what makes you pick a certain bottle of wine? How do you pick your
right.
wines? And a lot of my friends will say, well, I base it on your recommendations, or I see someone mention something on social media and I go from there. Or they pick it by the pretty label or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. For the most part, the average consumer isn't digging into the wine ratings in Wine Spectator. Not that those
It's
don't
true.
have an incredibly valuable
Oh, it's true.
place, but you
Yeah.
know,
And you need multiple.
peer to peer is super important.
Peer to peer is very important, and I find, or at least in like when I published my 2 books, people often told me they had to that they had heard about it, say in 3 different ways, like from a friend, then they saw maybe a display in the bookstore, but then they saw a TV interview or something. But it was that like that third hit or whatever that finally said, "Oh, I should look for that." Like, And so again, these tools are in that toolkit, and it's often a combination of things before the person actually moves to buy or to whatever, try. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think any smart brand will understand the role that social media, traditional media, marketing, public relations all play, and a really comprehensive program that encompasses all of those pillars is sort of a winning
yeah,
bet.
absolutely. So the third area I want to talk about, because I'm sure a lot of people, both inside and outside the wine industry, you don't have to be inside the wine industry to wonder. I'm sure we've all had the thoughts, am I drinking too much wine? And you wrote a really interesting piece about people in the wine industry, whether they're writers or retailers. I mean, there's just so many different jobs you can do within the wine industry. Are they drinking too much wine? And has it become sort of a way of doing business? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
So I found myself, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, I was on back to back to back to back
Mm-hmm.
trips, press trips, sales trips, business trips, where I just found there to be an excess of consumption. And don't get me wrong, like I love to drink. I love it. Wine is my business. It's my passion. And I do drink wine every day and it's part of my lifestyle. But I just found I was getting up and doing a tasting and then having wine at lunch and then another tasting and then another tasting. And then we were having cocktails before dinner and then, a cocktail at dinner and then a bottle of wine at dinner. And then, oh, we all have to go out for drinks after. And I kind of felt like, is this a little much? Like, and there was a pressure to do it. Like, if you decided you were done and you wanted to go to bed after dinner, it was like you got
Wow.
shamed.
Yeah, you likened
So
it to
I
college
found,
hazing or whatever. It was almost ritualistic that you couldn't be the party kill or the buzz kill.
right. And then you're expected to wake up the next morning and start all over again at 8:30 a.m. with this presentation, this wine tasting. And it just feels like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that it's all
Right.
necessary.
But the
So
people would
I get,
ask, aren't you spitting or, you know, did it still affect you, or is there real also drinking involved in addition to tasting?
yes. So at trade tastings and professional tastings, I mean, I always spit, and it's to avoid, getting inebriated, but it's also to keep my mind fresh so that I can taste properly.
Right.
Um, but I've been on certain press trips where no one is spitting, or few people are spitting, and certainly at lunch when the wine is served, you're not spitting. That's part of your lunch, and then you have the cocktails. So even if I took all the daytime tasting out,
Right.
it's still the wine or the cocktails with lunch. It's still the drink before dinner. It's still the wine at dinner, and then it's still the cocktails after,
Right.
which is fine every once in a while. But when you're sort of doing rinse repeat on that day after day, and and I think a lot of people in the industry look at it as a must. Like, you need to go do this because it's earning business. It's making those connections. I found myself wondering, like, is it though? Is this really closing the deal for me?
Mm.
Whether it's a story or whether it's the sale, does does this need to happen?
Right.
Um, and I think when we are looking at this sober curious movement and the dry Januaries and the low no alcohol options out there, I think they kind of go hand in hand. Like, we got to be careful.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. They're the flip sides of two extremes,
Right.
as you observed. Um, so yeah, I have to agree. Like, I've been on wine tours, and they do start early in the morning, and dinner is scheduled at 10 p.m.
Oh
And
God,
yeah,
yeah. Especially in Europe, you're like,
it's
you're not eating until 10:30 at
no,
night.
exactly. And you get to the dinner, and the winemaker would be like insulted if you weren't trying the wines. But then over dinner, everybody's there are no spittoons like while you're actually eating and they're serving the wines. And yes, you can just say no, but just sitting there looking kind of glum or not drinking. I mean, they're watching what you're doing too.
Yeah.
If you're drinking. But I almost found some of those agendas so tightly packed to be a form of violence. Like, it was just an assault, a physical assault from, you know, even sometimes starting as early as 7 in the morning. and going to tasting after tasting after, and I know those trips are expensive if you're sponsored by a winery council. I get that. And I want to get as much out of it as possible too. I want to review as many as I can. I want to write as much as I can based on that because, I want a good investment of my time. But there was no time even to go for a walk. It was insane.
Yeah, I will never forget a press trip I did through all of Spain. And it was one of my favorite press trips of all time. But I remember staying out one night until 5 in the morning for those, like, you had to have the gin and tonics from this place and after dinner.
Right.
And then the next morning we were scheduled at a cooperage for like 7 in the morning or 8 in the morning. And it's like, if for anyone who doesn't know what that is, like, we listened to hammering and sawing of barrel making, and everybody was
That's just
hungover. And it
mean.
was just like, kill me now. But I in the same way that I do my virtual tastings,
Yeah.
I love seeing people, like, regions and wine regions, so the tourism side and the wine side, coming together to create an itinerary that incorporates elements of other things,
Yes.
like wellness. Like, let's schedule in yoga or a spa treatment or a walk or whatever it is, so that people don't feel quite as assaulted, to your point, by the barrage of wine and barrel making.
Absolutely, because stories can be written about visiting the region, and that's not going to be just drinking or eating. It's going to include those other activities, because everybody wants that sort of full experience of a region.
Well, I always say we don't drink wine in a vacuum.
No.
Wine is part of our broader lifestyle. We drink it while consuming entertainment or wellness or business or whatever it is. It's cooking. It's part of something bigger.
Absolutely, I love that. So why do you think the wine industry, of course, and maybe more largely than that, the beverage alcohol, you're selling a product that is alcohol. So of course you're going to meet and try the product, but why do you think it has gone to this success? Is it because the wine industry or the beverage industry attracts people who want to drink to excess, or why do you think it's become the norm to go to those extremes to do business?
I think it sort of represents, and again, it's like that symptom of the bigger problem. It represents an old school view. So if anyone's ever watched Mad Men,
yes,
everyone's having cocktails at lunch, and it's a very male dominated culture, and they're pouring the scotch, to have a meeting at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
And I think the wine industry is traditionally male dominated. It's changing now, but it has been. And there was this old school notion of, this is how we do business. And when I was a sales rep in New York, that was how we did business.
Right.
I think it's changing, and there is a movement to introduce more moderation in a more feminine way, for lack of a better way of putting it. If anyone's familiar with a balanced glass community,
Kathy,
to talk about wellness in the drinks business, and so I'm thrilled to see that movement happening. But I think it does tie back to just the old school way of doing business, and that doesn't just apply to wine. I think it applies to business in general. And in a traditionally male dominated industry, that was it. And you're sort of expected to keep up, in particular as a woman who's trying to prove herself.
Right. Yeah. You don't need to have another hurdle, as you said, in making your gender more pronounced, that you can't keep up with the boys, as you say.
Right.
But again, you get those two extremes. So you've got this old way of doing business, and yet the flip side, sort of the puritanical side of even the wine industry, came out, at least for me, when my first book was called Red, White, and Drunk All Over. And it was a bit of
such a good book.
Thank you. But it was a poke at the trying to be irreverent about wine. But also, I went to many regions drinking wine, like tasting and drinking wine. So that was the title. But of course, there was a backlash against the title, saying you shouldn't be promoting this. And, I wasn't trying to promote immoderation, but there was almost a puritanical reaction from the wine industry itself about that title. And yet you have the excesses, these two extremes again that you talk about in some of your pieces. It's interesting why more of it can't come to a center of moderation and mindful drinking and whatever, but maybe that's hope for the future. I don't know.
Well, I mean, look at all the rules and regulations in the US wine industry are a result of prohibition,
It's
right?
true.
So,
Yep, that's true.
yeah.
We're still living with that. Well, what do you think about all the wine memes, the wine mom memes, I should say, like the mommy juice referring to wine and things like that? What's your take on that?
I'm fine with it and I live for memes. Sometimes I communicate with my husband like only in memes. Um, I'm fine with it. What I don't like is the backlash against those memes
Right.
because I'm a mom of two little boys and I drink wine.
Hmm.
And I'm not a train wreck. I get up and do my job. I don't need it to live and get through the day and get through. But you know what? I do get through a lot of incidents with my kids by like, oh my God, someone pour me a glass. Um, so I sort of take offense to it being used as a pejorative,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
guess, because I'm a mom and I drink wine and I get overwhelmed and yeah, I need a drink sometimes to deal with it, but it doesn't mean I'm a train wreck.
Right.
And I think sometimes there is the implication that you're a train wreck if you're sort of thought of as a wine mom, and it's like yeah, it's dismissive.
Yeah.
But I think the memes are funny and kind of legit.
Absolutely. I have forgotten to share photos. I want to do that I know we're heading into overtime here, so I would love to.
I could sit and talk wine all day.
Yes, me too.
I just need a glass. It's like
Exactly.
crack of dawn here, but
That's right. 7:30 a.m. your time right now.
ooh, I think it's 5:30 somewhere,
Okay,
right?
yeah, it's got to be. Okay, let me pull this up and get the picture up. Here we go. Application. Here we go.
Oh gosh, I'm nervous over what.
Oh no, it's
what are we
okay.
looking
It's
at?
all good. Can you see the picture now of
Yeah, me in a
you
tank.
in a tank? Where are you in this picture besides in a tank? Where are you?
So, one of my very favorite clients in the whole world is the region of Temecula Valley, Southern California wine country.
Ah,
And that photo was taken at Peltzer Winery in Temecula,
right.
where they had brought in some brand new tanks. And I was like, I got to get in this
Oh,
thing.
good. I'm glad to hear it's new because don't people die of CO2 or sometimes?
Oh, no, it had never been
Okay,
used. Yes, this was
good,
like
good.
brand
That's
spanking new.
great. I love that. Guaranteed quality right above your head.
Little essence of
Yeah,
Devin.
there you go. I love your sense of humor. Here you're tasting. Is this in Temecula or somewhere else?
Yes, that is actually in Temecula at South Coast Winery. We were creating, well, I wasn't, but I was sort of getting to participate by tasting. In We were creating a wine blend for to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the region,
Oh,
and
wow.
so that was me tasting one of the components there.
Where is Temecula? Like, can you situate it? We all know where San Francisco is. Napa and Sonoma are north. I assume you're going south, but kind of where is it?
So Temecula Valley is about an hour outside of San Diego,
Okay.
northeast.
Okay.
It's in Riverside County, but it is within a 1 to 2 hour drive of literally every major Southern California city. So, like an
Hmm.
hour from Orange County, hour from San Diego, hour from Palm Springs, 2 hours from LA.
Oh,
So,
wow.
it's a great region.
And do they specialize kind of in the same grapes like Syrah, Cabernet, Chardonnay that are sort of well known in warmer regions of
Yeah,
California?
it's a Mediterranean climate that's moderated by the Pacific Ocean through this big gap in the mountains. So it actually gets quite cold at night and in the mornings,
Oh,
and in the afternoons.
okay.
But yeah, they do a lot of great Mediterranean varieties: Syrah, Sangiovese,
Hmm.
Barbera, Vermentino,
Oh, wow. Lots
Grenache.
of Italian
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Okay. This is you at a wine tasting, I assume.
I think that's me at
Oh,
SomCon,
yes. Yes, yes.
um, doing a seminar there.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. And is this a pairing? Oh, the San Diego Food and Wine Festival. So you're pairing
Yes.
guacamole, dim sum, thyme?
That was my Temecula crew at the San Diego Bay Wine and Food Festival. Just I've been with those gals forever, so
Oh,
having some fun.
fun. Do you have a favorite pairing tip for guac or dim sum or thyme?
Oh goodness. Well, I always love the aromatic whites for sort of spicy Asian and exotic cuisine.
Yep.
Guac, you know what? I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna crack a Corona or
Ah,
a beer of
okay.
some sort. Like
Yep.
I just have to. Thyme, those herbs I love, like an earthy red.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh, great.
something like a Rhone blend or like a poopy gamay or something.
Okay. Love those descriptors. And you're into wellness. What are you doing here? Kickboxing?
This is so bizarre, but at the tender age of 40, so I think last year, I took up karate.
Oh, good for you.
Um, yes, I've always had this secret desire to be a ninja.
Oh,
Like
let's see.
it's like it's
There he
bad.
is. Oops.
Yes.
There-
Well, that was my husband and my kids.
Oh, wow. That
And
is
my
great.
oldest son started taking karate and I watched and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this. And yeah, working toward that black belt.
Let me just see. Your kids are adorable. There they are. Oh my gosh.
Thanks.
You're working toward a black belt. Wow. And look at them. They're into it too. Green belt, where is
Yeah.
that? Midway through?
So that last one was a blue white belt. Yeah, it's getting there.
Okay.
Probably a couple more years.
That's great. And are you a runner as well?
I try to do it all. I mean, not at all. I don't do it all well, but I think it's my way of sort of balancing my food and wine lifestyle that I feel a lot better about that glass of wine if I get out and move my body, and it helps with my anxiety and I sleep better.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was me after a run.
Oh, that's great.
My husband is like an incredible competitive runner and
Oh,
does
is he?
ultra marathons and
Oh,
marathons.
wow.
So,
Have
I don't necessarily keep up, but
Have you guys ever done the Médoc Marathon in Bordeaux?
no, but that sounds amazing.
Yeah, you
If I didn't have to actually run the marathon.
exactly. You get to run through, I don't know, 23 of the greatest chateaux, and they have wines out at the stations as the runners go by. You can partake. So it's pretty amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I finished 10 hours later.
He's staggering across the finish line. I love this photo. That's one of your
Oh
sons,
my.
obviously.
Yes, that is at an airport lounge. I literally like cannot fly without having a
Oh
glass,
yeah.
whether it's 6 in the morning or 10 o'clock at night. So he was photobombing me as I was enjoying the joys of traveling with small children.
And speaking of that,
Oh
is this
God,
him?
no, that's my youngest son when he was just born. So he's
Oh,
5 now, but living the vineyard life. That was at Robert Renzoni Vineyards, and I took him out, and he was not thrilled, but I was apparently. I thought it was funny.
that's so sweet. Oh my goodness. And what is this? Are you a baker? Is this pie?
That is me in my house in Italy, which I don't have a house in Italy, but when I lived there, I was renting a place,
Yeah.
making pasta from
Oh
scratch.
wow. Look at
I
you.
look at my brown hair.
That's great. Very authentic. Is that in Italy?
That's No,
No.
that's my mom,
Ah,
and me at the Cordon Bleu in Pasadena taking a cooking class together. So that's one of my biggest passions is cooking, and
ah,
they kind of goes hand in hand with wine, but
it
love to
does.
cook.
Absolutely.
And so does she. She's incredible.
Fantastic. And this must be at a wine show here with Temecula wines. I see the
Yeah, that was
sign.
at a wine spectator event, and I was, spreading the Temecula Valley gospel.
Literally. All
Yes.
right. Those are great, Devin. Really great. We are we're going to wrap up because this has been fantastic. Thank you. Is there
Thank you.
Absolutely. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to mention before I get to where we can find you online?
My gosh, I would love to see anybody join me for virtual tastings, of course. And I think, not to shameless plug, but I work with some cool brands doing them, and we always try to incorporate an element of lifestyle. So I've got one coming up where I'm working with two gals from the Toronto Symphony, and they're
Yeah,
doing a performance, and we're pairing wines with the classical music.
that's fantastic.
I bring in chefs, and they're really fun. And like I said, I'm a big believer that wine is part of a broader lifestyle, and
Great
I think
ideas.
everything I do tries to live up to that.
Great ideas. So, where can we find you online?
My website is devinparr.com. That's DEVIN, Parr, PARR.com.
Great.
And on Instagram, I'm at the SoCal Wine Gal.
Okay, great.
And so
Perfect.
those are the places I live.
Awesome. And just a reminder to everyone watching or listening, Devin has generously offered 2 premium tickets to one of her virtual tastings. And all you have to do is pick your social media platform of choice and post about a wine. Tag me so I make sure to get you into that contest. Thank you, Devin. Thank you for that and for this wonderful conversation. This has been absolutely terrific.
So fun. Like I said, I could sit here all day. This is great. Thanks so much, Natalie. I really appreciate it.
All right, take care.
Great way to start my day.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye.